Welcome everybody. In this one we're going to be talking about the next Spurs manager. I'm just taking a look at the odds comparison here. I'm going to run through it and we'll run through some of the profiles of these managers and if I think they will get the job. I do have a pick myself. I'll let you know that in a moment. First up is Xabi Alonso. Obviously a very classy character. He's doing very good things at Leverkusen. They're in the semi-final of the Europa League against Roma, currently 1-0 down from the first leg. Jose against one of his old players in Xabi Alonso. And that's the thing with Alonso, why I think he will be a great manager, why he's the sort of hot new thing in management, sort of what Nagelsmann was a few years back. And, you know, he's doing very well. But I think if you look at great managers, sometimes it's because they've been managed by a mix of really interesting managers, and that is certainly true of Xabi Alonso. Been at Real Madrid, he's been at Bayern Munich, he's been managed and played with the best of the best. There's just no getting around that, and I think he is a smart guy anyway. You can tell by the way he comes across, so he's going to have been absorbing all of that information, all of that class, all of that winning mentality. He's been coached by every kind of coach, you know, Rafa Benitez, Mourinho, Pep. The only thing here is, if there's rumours that Ancelotti will leave, Brazil want him. So if Ancelotti leaves Madrid, I do think that Alonso will also be Madrid's first choice, or one of their first choices. And for Alonso, if it's a choice between Real Madrid and Tottenham, it changes things, doesn't it? So I don't think we'll hear anything from this until the end of the season anyway, because some of these top targets, they've got business to do. You know, Alonso has got a semi-final to take care of in the league. I mean, he's done sensational. They were in the relegation zones when he took over. They're now sixth, so they will qualify for Europe. I think they qualify for the conference, is it, in Germany, sixth. So he's done well to get there, given where they were. Arne Slot, if you've never heard that name, he's a Dutch football manager. He's been at Feyenoord for a while, brought success there, plays a good brand of football. He's currently 6-1. Under that, we've got a trio of English managers, Brendan Rodgers, whose stock was very high up until this season, and I still think his stock is relatively high. He's a very good project manager, as is Graham Potter. Ryan Mason under him, I don't think he will get the job. I think he'll go back to being a coach. Brendan Rodgers, of course, brought an FA Cup, what Tottenham would do for an FA Cup, to Leicester. He has been successful apart from this season, and I think, you know, I've done videos on Leicester's, not demise, well, it is if they go down. Of course it's a demise, but at this moment in time, I still can't imagine them going down because of the quality, but they simply cannot defend. They've had lack of investment, they lost Kasper Schmeichel. All of these things, I don't want to put 100% of blame on Brendan Rodgers because it's not his fault. It's the board's fault at Leicester. They got 60 million for Fofana. They dragged that out, and it was, you know, they didn't want to sell him, but they ended up just selling him anyway because of Fofana sulking. They should have expected that. And then when they got that money, they didn't have the time, or, you know, they couldn't find the players to spend it on. And it cost them, and it has cost them, and it cost Brendan Rodgers, and it cost the relationship between Leicester and Rodgers, which was obviously so strong, given how well he's done there. Graham Potter, similar story in that his stock was so high before this season. He might tell you privately that he wished he'd stayed at Brighton, because I think any manager in that time at Chelsea would have found it difficult to succeed, and we're seeing that. I mean, you can't go in as Todd Bowley did and just sack everybody, non-playing staff, and try and mix up the you need to keep the ship just steady and slowly make changes, slowly understand how a football club is run. Thomas Tuchel, an early interview in the season, said he was having to teach Todd Bowley about boardroom stuff and how transfers work. That, you know, you don't want to be taking Thomas Tuchel away from the training pitch, but that's what was happening. So Graham Potter going in, squad list of 35 players. It was a mess, and I think even the best managers would have struggled at that time at Chelsea. Frank Lampard came in and has probably made Graham Potter look a little bit better, to be honest, because Frank's Chelsea at the minute are just dreadful. But yeah, Graham Potter, I think he would be my pick, to be honest, if I was the Tottenham board. If you can't get Alonso, of course, but just let Alonso continue. I mean, I think right now in management in general, teams are very quick to just look at a manager and think, right, he's the next Pep, he's the next whatever, the next Jose. It's funny how it works, and if you give managers time, I think that usually, if they are a good manager, the quality shines through over time, and you've seen that with Arteta. When you put a project in place, you've got to give it the time that it needs. You've got to give it the transfer window that it needs. I mean, look at the difference in Arsenal just signing Gabriel Jesus and Zinchenko and having Saliba come back. Those three players have made the difference. And Graham Potter, maybe a number 9 would have made the difference at Chelsea. They shouldn't have sacked Tuchel, let's be clear. So I think for Tottenham, you could look at that. They've had a bad season, but they are, I think, maybe 3 signings away. They need a keeper. They need a commanding centre-back. I mean, and they need the wing-backs as well. Because if you can start to defend, the problem with Spurs this season is that they're, and Conte basically said it himself, they're having to put so many players in defence and so many defensive-minded players because they're not good enough. The defenders are playing 5 at the back with 2 holding midfielders sometimes. Then, you're sacrificing positions at the top of the pitch. You're sacrificing possession at the top end of the pitch as well. So if they can fundamentally fix that weak defence that they have and get a new keeper and get some new defenders in, I think Tottenham will potentially challenge for the top 4, and that's a big if, because the major task for any of these managers that comes in, task number 1, can you keep Harry Kane at the club? Can you provide him with enough hope that you can bring trophies to this club? Because if you can't, if he's not invested, I think he'll leave this summer. Or if he's not invested, he might give you a year, but you have to prove in that year that you are challenging because his contract's up. So ultimately, it's up to Daniel Levy. I mean, if clubs are coming in for him and they're offering decent money, a new manager coming in like Alonso, like Graham Potter, might take the 70, 80 million over Harry Kane leaving on a free, or just the ability to have that money to spend. Thomas Frank would be a good one as well. I think he's a good manager, up and coming. He's done great things at Brentford, and it's a big season for Brentford as well. It's going to be a tough season, I think, next season for Brentford, because they're going to have to replace Ivan Toney. I do think that Toney will leave this season. He's got 20 goals in the Premier League. That is incredible. He's a very, very good forward. He's added so much to his game since he's come into the Premier League. He really has improved. And I think Thomas Frank would be a great manager. But again, all of these managers, you could hire Pep Guardiola, and Pep Guardiola would have the same issues at Tottenham that Conte did. Conte's not a bad manager. He might have gone sour, but it's because he was just annoyed. He's not had the greatest year personally, with 3 of his close friends dying, and those defensive issues. Any manager, any world-class manager, the best manager ever, would have those issues and would be saying to Daniel Levy, please, can you sign me some decent players that can defend? Because that's the issue at Tottenham. If you watch them, they're just soft. They're so soft, and they're inconsistent as well. They beat Man City, didn't they? And then they went and lost to like Leeds or something in the next game. That's the current odds. That's the current state of play for the next manager. Who do you think will get it? Ryan Mason is 8-1. I don't believe he will get it. I think he's not so much had a chance, but he's been interim, and there hasn't, from the outside looking in, doesn't seem to have sparked anything. I think if you're interim and you're going to get the job, you need to sort of spark a bit of a revival, and they're still sort of regressing, I think. And even Harry Kane coming out saying, we need to change the culture of the club, we need to improve our mentality. If Mason was having an impact, I don't think Kane comes out and says those kind of things, so it doesn't bode well for me. So I wouldn't waste any money on Mason. My personal pick would be Graham Potter. I still think he's got a lot to give, and as I said, I don't think you have the success that he's had in his career so far. The trajectory, the time that it took to do it, especially what he did in Sweden, shouldn't be forgotten. He is a fantastic coach, maybe just needs the right surroundings, and as I said before as well, that Chelsea gig is not the right scenario or situation for any player or manager. 35 players in the changing room, non-playing staff getting sacked on the daily. It's not a good place, and Todd Bowley needs to sort that out, or they're just going to have another catastrophic season if he can't delegate, essentially. So who do you think will get the gig? As I say, my pick is Graham Potter. I think Alonso is obviously the hot new thing, though, in football management, and that's why Real Madrid will possibly want him if Ancelotti does leave. Let me know who you think will get the job, who will be managing in that first game of the next Premier League season. Leave your comments below.